Go.
Hello and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I am Laura Ehrlich, your host, and our guest tonight is mother Daria Polatin. Before I introduce Daria, I want to thank you all for tuning in and let you know that you can now listen to Writer Mother Monster as a podcast on all major audio platforms or read the interview transcripts at your leisure, all on writermothermonster.com. If you enjoy the episode, please consider becoming a Writer Mother Monster patron or patroness on Patreon. Your support helps make this series possible. Please also chat with us during the interview. Your comments and questions will appear in our broadcast studio, and we'll weave them into our conversation. Now I'm excited to introduce Daria. Daria is an award-winning playwright, TV writer, producer, and author. She's currently developing a TV limited series based on her novel Devil in Ohio for Netflix. She was a co-executive producer on J.J. Abrams' Castle Rock for Hulu, where her episode Laughing Place was named one of Entertainment Weekly's best TV episodes of 2019. She's been a co-executive producer on Hunters for Amazon and writer-producer on 2 seasons of Jack Ryan on Amazon, Condor, MGM Direct TV, Heels on Stars, and Shut Eye on Hulu. As a playwright, her play Palmyra will be presented at the Kirk Douglas Theater in LA, and her work has been produced at the Kennedy Center in New York, London, and Hong Kong. Born of Egyptian descent, Daria received her MFA from Columbia University, and she's a founding member of the Kilroys, the advocacy group for gender equality in the American theater. She has one son who is 11 weeks old, so she's right in the thick of it, and she describes writer motherhood in 3 words as stunning, shifting, softening. Welcome, Daria.
Hello.
Hello. I need a big breath after that introduction.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to have you. It's great to meet in person as well. And I'm just going to jump right in by asking how you're doing with a newborn in the midst of a pandemic with all of the things you're working on.
It is a lot, but it is wonderful. It is life full on. And of course, everything always happens all at once. I'm really enjoying my son. He's just so delightful, and it kind of just puts everything in perspective because everything is new. Every day is new. Every movement that he does is new, and he makes new sounds, and it's just really refreshing. And in contrast to what's going on in the world.
Yeah. My gosh. So at 11 weeks, I'm trying to remember back, my daughter's 4, to what 11 weeks was like, 11 weeks. So he's like 3.5, 4 months.
He's almost 3 months.
3 months. Oh my gosh. Is he sort of rolling over right now and like doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah. He like tosses his hips to the side and, flips his body over. And when I try to roll him and do tummy time, now he like bucks back and he's like, I'm not going to do tummy time right now, mommy.
Okay. So he's getting willful.
He's fantastic. Yeah.
Will is coming out.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was it like being pregnant during a pandemic?
Very isolating.
Yeah.
Very isolating. I found out I was pregnant on New Year's morning. My husband and I we got married last fall, and we were on our honeymoon, and came back in January, and I was working on the show Hunters, the Amazon show about Nazi hunters, with Al Pacino, and I was working on that for the beginnings of my pregnancy when I would, go get nauseous and like step out
Oh,
of the
no.
writer's room, or I would take naps in my car in the parking lot because I was so tired and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want anyone to know. And I bought all these baggy clothes so that nobody would see my burgeoning belly. And then it was very interesting because that writer's room was in person to start, and then we moved in March to a virtual writer's room. And from then on, all the sort of in-person meetings and writing and stuff in my industry just went virtual. And so nobody knew I was pregnant. And I wasn't planning on shouting it from the rooftops anyway, because of bias,
Mm-hmm.
conscious or unconscious. But I kept it. No, I didn't really tell anybody, and then nobody knew because nobody saw me. And by the end of the pregnancy, I was like really big, and I would just like frame myself out of the picture for my meetings and stuff. But yeah, it was very isolating. I did not. I still don't. Because the baby is so young. I barely go out. I walk around my neighborhood, wearing a mask, and my husband gets groceries, and that's about it. I mean, we really
Yeah.
don't go out. We just don't want to risk the exposure. It's there's so many unknowns with the disease still, and so just to be on the safe side, we're super careful. I mean, the most exposed we were was in the hospital for 4 days when you have tons of people coming in and out. Of course they're all wearing masks and they're all very careful and very respectful, but that was probably because we really hadn't been around people, and then suddenly we're around tens of people, um, but yeah, so it was pretty isolating, and it's still fairly isolating, although it's kind of nice to not have to go anywhere. I have no FOMO. I'm not like, oh no, I'm missing this party or this event because I'm home with the baby. Most people are home, so in that way, it's nice to not have to go anywhere and just to really get to spend this time with my son, because it goes so quickly. It's already, I look at pictures of him from like a few weeks ago and I'm like, oh, he was so little. And like, he's still like, well, he's like 14, 15 pounds now, but the time flies. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh,
Oh, there you are. Oh, it just stopped again.
okay.
Oh,
Let's
there
see.
it
Did
is.
that help? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I won't move. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, people tell you that time flies, and it's hard to quite understand what that means until you become a mother, right? I
Yes.
know that was something you said that you'd wanted to talk about when I asked you if you had questions before the interview. Specific questions you wanted to talk through, and you said you're interested in how the concept and accessibility of time has changed in light of having a child. So we just hinted on that, but tell me more.
Time can go seems to time is really punctuated when you have a child, and particularly a baby. And some things feel like they're very long, and some things feel like the time goes like that.
Mhm.
Um, and my time, I used to have a certain sensibility of my time and my days and what I could get done, and you know um, and now, like, the time periods that I have are much shorter, and it's not how I'm used to. I can work very quickly, and I have worked very quickly, and working in TV, or sometimes doing things very fast, but um it, like having to code switch
Mhm. Mhm.
is really tricky, and like a few minutes of feeding can feel like hours.
Yeah.
And then the nap feels like 1 second, that
Right.
so time just has all these new nuances, it feels like, even though it is a constant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's fascinating. I'd love to hear more about the differences between writing for TV and for theater, and then you've written a novel, and now you're adapting the novel for TV, which must be a whole different ball of wax. So,
Yeah.
um, where to start? Because there's so much, and you've done so much. Let's start with maybe let's go back to the beginning, and I'll ask you what you wanted to do. Did you want to work in TV? Did you want to work in theater? Did you want to write novels? All of the above?
Sure. Well, when I was really little, I wrote short stories. I mean,
Mhm.
I started a lot of stories.
Yeah.
I started great novels, but they, ended up being short, short stories. Um,
Mhm.
so I started in that format, but I got into theater when I was in high school, and I went to this high school. It was public school, and it had an amazing drama program, and in that there was a lot of like student directed and student written projects. So I started writing plays in high school,
Hmm.
and then I went to Boston University for undergrad, and I was in the theater department there, and I studied acting and theater, and I was actually majoring in acting, and one day I was walking down the hallway, and one of the teachers came up to me and he said, "You are a writer and you need to take my playwriting class." And I was like, uh, "Oh, I'm kind of busy. I have all my acting classes." And he's like, "No, you need to take my class." And I was like, "Okay." And I took the class, and I was really busy. And I tried to drop the class, and he's like, "I'm not signing your form. Um, Not training you would be like not training a ballerina, and you need to finish your play, and that's all. Finish the play. That's it. That's all you need to do for the class." So I was like, "Oh, finish this play." And what I had done was I adapted a short story by Chekhov, because he wrote these beautiful, emotional short stories, and I loved him as a playwright as well. And um, he was one of the first playwrights to write dramedy,
Hmm.
have that um, great subtext going on of like, we're so happy, the
Yeah.
idea of they're like dying. Um, so I was always very drawn to him. So I wrote this play, and for this class, and it ended up being produced for the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, and it won this contest, and it got published, and the play got produced at the Kennedy Center in DC.
Mhm.
And I had moved to New York, and I kind of landed at 21, 22, with a published play, and this
Mhm.
playwriting door opened for me, all because this teacher who made me write this play. Um, so I started writing plays. I kept writing plays in New York. I was in this wonderful group called Youngblood, which is a group of emerging playwrights under 30, and we would write and produce plays. Um, I had a couple of productions there. I ended up going to grad school at Columbia, and there I also studied, really focused on playwriting. And as I was finishing up at Columbia, I sold a play to a network and developed that into a pilot. And I kind of dipped my toe into television. And that was also around the same time that TV was opening up, and it wasn't just Law and Order and Friends. There was more
Mhm.
drama, more nuance, character work. Not that those other types, sort of types of, you know, Law and Order is a procedural or half hour, sitcom, aren't very, very, very difficult to do as a writer. They make it look easy, but those are very hard to write. But I felt like, watching like, Weeds and Sopranos, like Nurse Jackie, like, oh, this is those kinds of stories and characters interested me. And so I moved out to LA and started working my way up in TV. And it was so my entrance into TV kind of corresponded with actually the first show I staffed on, Shut Eye, which was on Hulu, about a fake psychic with real visions, which was fabulous. It's really fun to work on. At that point, there were like maybe 200 shows on the air, and now there are over 500 scripted shows on the air. So the medium has just exploded, and lucky for me. So I feel like that my timing is really lucky.
Well, and a lot of hard work went into that too. Don't sell yourself short. Yes.
That too. So
Yeah.
I still write plays, not super often. I did a program with the Center Theater Group out here in LA, and I developed my play Palmyra with them, and I'm writing a short play for a benefit festival in the spring. But I mostly focus on TV now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely want to get to the translation of your novel to a TV show. But first, let's see. Let's backtrack a little bit to the timing issue. And you mentioned that you can sort of quickly write. Is that so? Talk me through your drafting process and whether you write faster for TV, how that process changed when you wrote then a novel. Did you have to slow down? Were you able to keep your pace up? What was that process like?
Good question. Well, I can get into it in a minute, but TV has very different parts of the process.
Hmm.
There's the pitching, and you have to write a pitch, and you have to write basically a sales monologue of your show. And that's one type of writing. Then there's outlining for an episode, and that's a 15-page or so document where you are telling the story of each scene.
Each scene in an episode or for the whole arc of
An
a show?
episode, like
An episode.
you do an outline for an episode, and then you write the script, which is the fun part. And if you've done all the work, building up to it, then the script is like really fun because you're writing dialogue and it's what you're writing. So I can do them all quickly now because I've been doing it for a long time, but they're all sort of like different levels of arduousness. Like writing a pitch is very tricky. It's like every word is, well, every word of a script is finely crafted as well. But like, that's the funnest part for me is just writing the script, writing the scenes. Writing outlines is tough. I know a lot of writers outline their projects in no matter, in different mediums. Anyway, and it's not the funnest to do an outline, but you need to do it's the scaffolding for the cathedral that you're going to make. In fiction, I started out when I graduated from Columbia. I graduated with a degree in playwriting, and I was like, okay, now what? And I ended up getting a job writing ghostwriting for Alloy Entertainment, and I ghost wrote 2 novels for one of their New York Times bestselling middle grade series. So those were under very tight timelines, and they were also a fixed amount of pay. So it's like, okay, the faster I write these, the more I'm getting, paid. And so I kind of taught myself to work work, not to belabor that
Mhm.
work. And plus, it was the first draft for the author of the series who was going to rewrite it anyway.
Oh.
So, then when I wrote Devil in Ohio, I actually wrote the first 100 pages. I wrote part 1 of the book, and I wrote an outline of the rest of the book, and we sold it off of that. And then and I wasn't working a lot in TV at the time. And then, of course, as soon as I sold it, I got very, very busy. I got my first big job, and I was like, okay, I'll write it when I'm done with this show. And then I got my second big job, like a dream job, working on Jack Ryan with Carlton Cuse, who did Lost, which was one of my favorite shows. And so I ended up writing the rest of the book at like 5 a.m. and at midnight and on my lunch breaks. And it was very, very, very difficult. And I was just like, gotta get to my deadline, crawling to the finish line. Yeah. So do I look like full time? Of course. But,
So now I know that you're doing well, we'll get to this, but I know some of the things you mentioned you've been doing right now, and we'll get to that. But are you on maternity leave, or did you get maternity leave? Have you been working and caring for a newborn in the midst of the pandemic? What have the
well,
last 11 weeks looked like for you?
I took maternity leave, but I'm in the middle of a couple projects, and I started back on one of them about 3 weeks in. Just an hour or 2 a day. So and even there was, I would say there was like maybe 3 weeks. Yeah, there was about 3 weeks. But even then, it was like, my reps were like, "Hey, we don't want to bother you, but we need to get back to these people about this deal, and what do you think?" And so they were very respectful of my time. But I put an away message on my email, which was good. And I said, "BRB." So yeah, I mean, now I'm just, I'm working as full capacity as I can. My husband's mother has been here for the last month helping us with the baby, which has been amazing and definitely giving me a lot more time. But I still am feeding, and we do some bottles, but still, it's I am my day is, I have little chunks of time, essentially. Yeah.
How have you noticed your brain working differently now that you have your newborn with you?
I have to because of the amount that I need to get done, I need to work quickly. And it's a good lesson in not second guessing myself as
Hmm.
much. And I need to just make decisions and move to the next. And, in the past where I may have like really gone over something over and read over and read over and read over and improved it one more time, I don't have time to do that now. And also I've been doing it for a very long time. So for me, it's kind of about trusting the process and trusting that I've been doing this for many years and it's okay, and trusting my intuition, my first um my first draft. I don't want to say that I'm shortchanging the process, but I can move through the process much quicker now, and I have to. Otherwise, I can't keep up, or I would have to take on less, either as a writer, or as a mother, and I don't want to do that. I want it all.
No, that leads us to a great place, where I want to ask you about what has been challenging about wanting it all, because you have such a successful career and now you have a small child, and it sounds as though you're saying that you've built up so much great momentum at work that it's hard to let go of that. So what is the biggest challenge right now? And then what do you foresee as being challenging? Are there things you're trying to prepare for?
I think the challenge is there's never going to be enough time for all of the things.
Hmm.
Um, and I just have to make peace with that. I mean, I'm always probably going to feel like I'm not doing enough in a certain area, whether it's this project or that project or with my son or with my husband, etc. You know, there's a lot of things, and I'm just going to have to be comfortable with that there's only so much pie, you know, and it's going to get um, you know, portioned off. And I one magical thing is that my son, I don't want to even maybe say it too loud, but my son sleeps through the night now. So, and he didn't at first. I will say the, the first 3 weeks and really the first 6 weeks were very, very, very hard. I also had a C-section. I was in labor for 56 hours.
Oh my God, Daria.
And then I had an emergency C-section. So it was a lot of recovery. I'm still recovering. I think that people don't talk about how much physically pregnancy and birth affects your body and the pain that
Mhm.
women go through. I'm like, this is insane. And other mothers are like, yeah. And I'm like telling her, like, my back hurts, like this hurts. I like have acid reflux, like I can't. He's like, oh, you know, but like, and then you tell other, like nobody talks about it, you know. You tell
Mhm.
they're like, oh yeah, I had that. And I think also biologically, like your body just makes you forget because it wants you to have another baby, you
Mhm.
know, biologically. So it's like people, you know, I would mention something and then a girlfriend would be like, oh yeah, that did happen to me. I forgot about that. But anyway, so there's oh, the sleeping. So since he started sleeping a decent amount after that growth spurt, the 6 week growth spurt.
Mhm.
And I'm 6 feet tall. My husband is 6'1.5", and so he's a very tall, uh, long baby. So he can hold on to his milk for a while. So that makes all the difference, you know, that I can get uh, a decent stretch of sleep. If I did not, I don't know that I could do what I'm doing because I can function on little sleep, but it's trying. So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you are doing. And you were telling me before the interview started, that your book has been picked up by Netflix, right? Is that we
yeah,
can say that? So tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. So I when the book came out, I sold the development rights to a studio, and then I pitched the book with the studio. And because of, you know, obviously my background as a TV writer, I pitched, you know, it was for me to adapt.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and then we sold it to Netflix, and that was a couple of years ago. And so for the last couple of years, I've been writing the pilot, the first episode, you know, as a sort of here's what the show would be. And we've done lots of different revisions, and we brought in a director. And then finally, a couple of days ago, they were like, great, we want to open a writer's room and develop it as a limited series. So we'll be starting that in January, which I'm so excited about. And it's neat because I've lived with this story for, you know, at least 5 years. Um, and it's really fun for me to bring it into television, which is, you know, my medium that I've spent the most time in, and to tell those stories visually, um, and through dialogue.
Mhm.
So, and another thing, the book was YA, and through the character, mostly through it goes back and forth, but mostly from the perspective of Jules, and who's 15, and the series will probably, Jules and May are still, will still have that like single white female, kind of relationship between them, but it will focus more also on the mother, on
Mhm.
the psychiatrist who, has this kind of slow developing obsession with helping May, and it will continue to cause fissures in her family as the show goes on. So
Yeah.
it'll be more of a adult drama, although there are still the teen characters.
No, that sounds congratulations. That's
Thank
so
you.
exciting. Yeah, for anyone who didn't catch the title, it's Devil in Ohio. YA novel now being transformed into a Netflix show. So let's talk a little bit, and I want to get into how that book and how the story might change for you now that you're a mother yourself,
Yeah.
because the character is, or the book very much is about mother and daughterhood, right? And family, and as you said, the fissures in a family that can be caused when you allow in an unexpected element, which in this case is May, who's another 15, she's 15, right? 15-year-old girl from a questionable background. So let's talk a little bit first just about that adaptation process, and then I want to sort of move into motherhood and how it might impact the writing. But can you talk a little bit about how it might be different to adapt a book that you've written yourself into a TV show versus adapting or working on a script from, say, Stephen King, adapting his story for the screen as you did in Castle Rock?
Well, I think you have to have that same ruthlessness that you do with not your baby, not
Hmm.
not your creation, and it's kind of challenging to do. It's a muscle that I've developed over the years, because in TV you write stuff, something changes, you rewrite it, you got to throw it out, you kill your darlings. Like, I've become comfortable with that process of like, you know what, that scene doesn't work anymore, more, let's cut it, or that's that character, we don't have the budget for it,
Hmm.
and it hurts as a creator, but I I I kind of have that um muscle developed, so it's easier for me to look at my, even though it's my work, and like, oh, but this is so important, I'm like, the scene, it's not a dramatic scene, like, with every moment, every minute of TV costs a lot of money to produce, um and a lot of effort and energy to make, so you have to really be um, relentless in refining and really making every moment on screen that important, because if it's not, it will get cut for budget, it will get cut in the editing room if it's like, if it doesn't really sync up story wise. um, so I try to do the most work on the scripts and crafting the story and like outlines, so that by the time it's shot, it's like, it's all in, it's like what I want it to be.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, so I've gone down a rabbit hole.
No,
But,
well, that happens with a newborn too. But no, actually, I'm interested just to go back for a second to thinking about a story from that perspective, from the TV perspective, where every word has maybe a cost value to it. I'm wondering, when you wrote your novel, did you approach it in a similar way because of that training from TV? Was it sort of like every sentence has to be packed with, significance, every scene has to have action, or was it different in some way?
I tried to keep that rigorousness. Um, I remember there was actually a chapter that I wrote that I really loved, and toward it was in the first maybe a quarter the way through, and it was a scene where Suzanne took May shoe shopping.
That's the mother, took
Yeah,
the
took the
estranged,
girl
the young girl. Yeah.
from the cult shoe shopping,
Mhm.
and it was really kind of creepy because she like got down and was like putting the shoe on her, and it was a real like kind of reversal of power where you can always look at one way to interpret status is sort of height and who's standing. You kneel to the queen. I'm watching The Crown.
Yeah.
um, but it ended up with May sitting and Suzanne kind of literally at her feet, which was kind of a weird, creepy, to me, scene that I envisioned and wrote. And then we ended up cutting it because it just didn't feel like it had a place. Now, maybe make a note to myself, maybe for the TV show, like maybe that scene, maybe we have room for that scene. And
Mhm.
maybe it's part of the story we're telling in that episode. I obviously we're telling the story over the arc of the whole season, but I really love when each episode has a sort of arc to it and theme. Almost that The Crown actually does it really well. Like each episode is like it's kind of contains a theme, a question, and a theme, a question, and an answer. It's so I try to do that and make sure everything in that episode is really lining up with that. So back to your question. Yeah, I tried to keep the relentlessness of the storytelling.
Mhm.
But there's less cooks in the kitchen. There's who reads it? My manager, my agent, a couple of friends, the editor. Whereas in TV, you've got a writer's room. You've got the producers, you have the studio executives, you have the network executives. When you're filming, you get the director's point of view, you get the actors. I really don't want to say this line. I don't think my character would say this line. Okay, all right, well, what do you think that they would say? And like you have a lot more cooks in the kitchen, and something has to make it all the way through
Mhm.
editing. You might have to cut something for time if depends on, well, in streaming now you can have different length episodes, but
Mhm.
on broadcast has to be a certain amount of pages and it has to run a certain length because that's all you have. So things get really, really, really changed in the process of TV usually. And I think books are, it's the most direct connection between author and reader. There's the least interference
Mhm.
in that form of written material, which was interesting to have that direct a relationship with the reader or with the
Wow.
experiencer of the consumer of the story.
So what is it like now to take the book that you had the least amount of interference with the story and then hand it over to or you will be handing it over to a writer's room, and then to all of these people who will bring it to life. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily I'm the showrunner and I'm the creator and executive producer, and I get, and that's why I do like TV, because you get to have the authority over the process, and hopefully, ultimately the final product. But yeah, it's really different, and things come up and that are different than I might have thought. People pitching ideas, or just the story kind of evolves. Like Peter is a much more evolved, becoming much more evolved character than in the novel. And we're diving a lot more into Suzanne, and bringing more to the page that sort of I had in mind for her backstory in life and other things that were going on for her, but it's articulated more now. But yeah, I guess it would be, if it were like this is me on the page type of story, it might be trickier. But my characters, I love my characters and I relate to my characters, but ultimately they're characters, and they're gonna, things are gonna get shifted around. But you pick your battles. Some things you fight for. Some things are like, okay, fine. If I'll take that note for now. But you know what? This other thing, I feel really strongly, and I really want to keep this scene because of this, this, and this. And usually people are like, okay, if that's So it's about like picking your battles, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So
yeah.
a lot of decisions to make.
Oh, and as you're writing the first couple episodes of the show, and changing that perspective, basically primarily from the 15-year-old to now the mother's point of view, and now a mother yourself, are you seeing your experience as a new mother playing into the story?
It's really interesting, because I think I looked at well, the timing of it's probably interesting too, because I wrote the book from the experience of being a daughter and the
Mm-hmm.
experience of being a sister. And now, moving into this iteration of it, I now have the experience of being a mother. So I'm interested to see how that changes. I certainly understand now this very visceral, sort of primal, almost monster feeling of doing anything for your child.
Mm-hmm.
To the sort of mama bear. I have a new understanding visceral understanding of what that is.
Mm-hmm. Has that changed? So just looking back at the novel, since I know you probably can't tell us too much about what you're planning for the show, but looking back at the novel, um, has the experience of motherhood deepened your understanding of the relationship between Suzanne and Jules?
Definitely. Yeah. Um, and I'm interested to see how that progresses, me putting myself more on that, of course, any character I write, I kind of emotionally put myself in their shoes, so I can know what they're thinking
Mhm.
and feeling. But I'm excited to continue that process as we move forward in the show. And the show it's from the mother, and it kind of triangulates between the mother and Suzanne and Jules and May's perspective.
Mhm.
It's almost like a love triangle in a weird way. So we'll see. I mean, motherhood is still very new to me, so it's all kind of
Yeah.
unfolding.
Yeah. Well, what's not new to you that I found interesting is that you said that motherhood and daughterhood that the mother and daughter relationship in that book was that you could draw from your own experience as a daughter to write the book. So, what was your relationship like with your mother, and how did that set your expectations for motherhood?
Oh, well, I grew up mostly with my mother as a single mother and with my sister. So that sort of triangular relationship between the mother and two sort of sister figures like Suzanne, Jules, and May is
Hmm.
kind of similar to me and my mom and my sister. Um, so I was, with this growing up with a single mother and who worked a lot, and me and my sister never quite got enough time and got enough. We just never got enough from her because she was, um, obviously stretched thin in a lot of different directions. So that is maybe kind of emblematic of that Jules and May relationship of
Hmm.
them both, kind of vying for Suzanne's love and attention, and how Jules feels so betrayed that her mother is paying attention to this sort of pseudo sister of hers. So that probably comes from my own psychology and upbringing. Um,
Yeah, no, and how did that set your expectations for the type of mother that you want to be?
well, um, I want to be a safe space for my son, and I want to be a grounded place that he can always come to for comfort, in whatever form that would be.
Hmm.
And it's sort of a challenge for me to really be present for him. Um, Not to say that my mother wasn't, but it was hard. And my father was not around very much, and now and my husband is the opposite. He's very
Hmm.
present, and we both just want to be a very present and grounded, for him, for our son to be able to be grounded and present himself,
Hmm.
and it's um it's working so far. I mean, so far he's pretty chill. Like, he's able to kind of regulate and settle down, and he knows we're coming, to feed him or to do, he knows his needs will be met.
Hmm.
So, of course he speaks up when he's too tired or too hungry, which is great. Um, but yeah, we're just trying to provide for him in a really supportive way, but not overbearing way. Uh,
Hmm.
and I didn't feel that as a child. Um, and not to any lack of trying on my mother's part. Uh, I won't say the same about my father, but uh, yeah, I'm of course, always trying to provide, a better future, do things in a better way um, than in the past and than what I had. So
Yeah.
goals.
I know. What expectations did you have, or do you have, since you're still so new at motherhood? As I still feel like I'm new at motherhood, and I have a 4-year-old. But um, what expectations do you have about being a mother and a writer, and of course all of the other roles that you inhabit? TV producer and a wife and a sister and a daughter. How are you putting some strategies in place for balancing those things? Do you have fears surrounding that? Are you feeling good about it right now? How are you feeling?
I feel I'm fearful of not having enough time for actually all of it, being
Yeah.
spread too thin. But mainly, the most important would be like feeling like I'm not having enough time for my son, because he's the most vulnerable of all of those elements. And I was actually talking to my husband about bringing in a nanny for, once I start opening the writer's room. He's around, he's a writer as well. But, I think we're going to bring in someone in at least part time to start, it may be more, because I'm just going to need to be running a TV show.
Mhm.
But I started crying because, I, um, I think there's the mom guilt is really very real. And I guess just trying to stay grounded and teach I guess through example, taking care of the things I need to take care of is an important thing to do. Taking care of the thing, if I just sacrificed my career and stopped and became a mother full time, that's not serving me, and I wouldn't be happy, and that wouldn't be serving him.
Mhm.
So I'm also just sort of practically, I think, gonna keep my mornings with him and keep that, really special time that I have with him from when he wakes up, to when I would sort of go to the office, from like 6 to 10, and really spend that time with him. And then I spend time with him before bed. So kind of carving out those periods of time to just really be with him and
Mhm.
try not to be on my phone too much, or all the other things, and just kind of really be present with him, for those times. That's my goal. And then during the day, I have an office in our backyard, and so during the day, as I have breaks and have moments, we'll come in and be with him as I eat lunch with him, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a good strategy. It does. I know. I know, and it's so hard, especially when they're only a couple of weeks old like that. And I remember just going to the first daycare appointment for my daughter to check out different daycares before she was even born. And
Mm.
we got back in the car and I just started bawling. It was so hard to think about, but as people have told me, and it's true, like it doesn't get easier, it just gets different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helpful, or that was helpful for me to hear that, like, there's never gonna be a point where it's like, "Oh, I've got it, and now it's easy." It's like you'll get it, and then it'll change, and then you'll have to get it all over again, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is sort of just a revolving door of like change.
Yeah.
Like he changes, his needs change very, quickly, and like he used to need that, now he doesn't. Now and we're just always kind of trying to figure out what he needs, what we need to give to him. And
Mhm.
sometimes now, like he used to need to be held because he was a tiny baby, and now he loves sitting in his swing, and he like looks at this thing for like 20 minutes, like just like going around, and we're like, and I'm like, you know what, he's fine. I'm not going to interrupt him, or like do a
Yeah.
puppy show. Like he's okay. It's a lot of observation, actually.
Mhm.
A lot of like you have to be very present to be able to assess the circumstances and kind of get out of your own expectations of what he might need, because it might have changed.
Yeah.
So there's a real kind of almost meditative zen, like stepping back and just um, looking at things with a clear, fresh perspective, and not projecting, what expectations onto him, or his needs, or what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's very wise, actually. I'll have to remember that myself. And I think that helps with mom guilt too, right? Because that's where the expectations are. It's what you expect of yourself as a mother, and then taking that step back and saying, well, maybe my child doesn't need that in this moment. The thing that I expect of myself, or the thing that I think I should be, that's not what they need from me as their mother in this moment. So yeah. So tell us, we have just a couple minutes left, but tell us where we can get Devil in Ohio, which I have read and I will recommend to everybody, and then where we can watch it, where and when. What's the timeline?
Okay. Well, first of all, the book, you can get it on Big Bad Amazon and or at your local bookseller. You probably have to order it. But I know, I think they should have paperback and in the hardcover. There's also the audiobook, which do you have an audiobook of your, did you do it or did someone?
No. I didn't even know they did it until someone asked me, like, oh, did you know there's an audiobook? And I was like, like, when did that happen?
It's very weird to listen to it because it's like a different voice than was in my head. But there is an audiobook, there is Kindle. It's a fun kind of quick read. It's a fun gift to a young reader. I would say 7th, 8th grade, kind of depending on their exposure to a thriller.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely some mature themes. And, ideally, if everything, you never know with these things. Ideally, I think the show would air in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So we would write it and make it next year and edit it. And who knows what their slate will be then. But that would be the general idea.
Well, it's very exciting, and I'm glad that we got to talk about it tonight too. And hopefully, people are bookmarking that time frame so that we can all watch it, and then have you back when your show will be out, and then your son will be older, and we can have a whole different conversation.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he'll
Yeah,
be walking around, running around, probably, this guy.
yeah, yeah. Very tall, lanky runner.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Daria, for joining us. Stick around after I end the broadcast so we could say goodbye. But this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for talking honestly and openly about your family and about your work. It's been wonderful.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for joining us. You can watch the video again. You can listen to the episode as a podcast, or you can read the interview transcript in a day or so, all on writermothermonster.com. And if you enjoyed the conversation, again, please consider becoming a Writer Mother Monster patron or patroness on Patreon. Thank you all again, and we'll see you next week.